So I want to start out by giving you a little bit of backstory. We love Maine and tend to vacation there an awful lot every year. And every time we're up in Maine, oh yeah, like Cadia, we are hopeful that we're going to see moose. We don't tend to see them down here in Massachusetts, but they are definitely up there in Maine, and they're one of my favorite animals. So it's always very special for me personally when I get to see them. But we haven't seen any moose in our summer adventures.
We've struck out the last several trips, even when we were, specifically looking for moose.
Yeah. I mean, I can think back to when our daughter was 3 years old, and we were up in Metawisla Lodge and spent days looking for them to photograph them and saw nothing. And she's a teenager now. So it's been a while, right? So anyways, why am I telling the audience this stuff? Dustin, why don't you chime in now? Why is Lynn babbling again during this episode? And this time, not even about birds.
She's Twitter-pated about a mammal.
I totally am.
Yeah, I hoped we'd spot one for you, but I never dreamed that we'd have this many great experiences and just be able to camp with them, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So first off, our campground details. We stayed at Kidney Pond Campground, which is one of the 2 campgrounds in Baxter State Park that has cabins. But don't be fooled. This is a deeply rustic location with only the bare bones of any amenities. So no electricity, no running water, no cell service, no trash cans or showers.
Nope.
This year, for the first time, I found out my iPhone did have a little bit of satellite coverage for text messaging only. That was the extent of our connectedness, so it was great. But just the essentials. We had a private log cabin, a propane lantern, an outhouse, wood stove, and lakefront access right on the banks of Kidney Pond. This was a great starter point for a lot of small trailheads. If you're into hiking, this was near the trailheads for Sentinel Mountain, Double Top Mountain, Lily Pad Pond, Big and Little Rocky Ponds, and a pond called Beaver Pond that's, I think, actually just over the border of the park.
Yeah, this is an extraordinary, beautiful location, as are so many places in Baxter State Park. And when we were there, as you've alluded, we got to camp with a very special neighbor, which our audience can probably figure out who that is. But
well, my first sign of this was when I was looking for the Merlin babies. I looked down at one point and saw a giant pile of scat that I knew could only be from a moose. So I was a little surprised that the moose was hanging out so close to the campground, but not being terribly experienced with moose poop. I didn't know if it was 1 day old or 10 days old. I had no idea. But it turns out that this moose was basically bedding down in that spot 100 yards or so from our outhouse, of all places, every night, essentially. So I first noticed her the first morning at camp. I went out paddling, and as I was on my way in, I spotted her to my right and was able to get some really good initial photography of the first moose that we saw. She was a yearling cow, meaning born last year in 2024, just having had probably her first birthday. So maybe she's, 14 months old or something like that.
And how did you know that? You didn't just guess at her age, right?
I didn't. The rangers kind of clued us in, but you could tell that she was young, a little bit scrawny, skinny enough to see her ribs. She was kind of still had the all legs kind of feature walk that young deer have, that kind of thing. So you could tell it was a youngin', as
she
they
was
say.
Like a supermodel as far as mooses go. I thought she was gorgeous, and those long legs, she was adorable.
And she was totally nonplussed about our presence. I was able to just sit in the kayak 40, 50 yards from her, shooting photography to my heart's content, and she was eating away, having no problem with my presence. And she showed up like clockwork every morning and early evening after that, feeding on those aquatic plants, especially the water lilies and pondweed, which are staple in a moose's summer diet. And other than like the dripping water and the crunching sound you could hear her make when she was chewing, she hardly made a sound, just slowly and quietly browsed along the shoreline. So we were just lucky humans that got to share that space in nature with her. We all wanted her to feel safe, so we could enjoy observing her from the porches of our cabins, and she was content with that.
Yeah, she was great. But that wasn't all, right? It was a, but wait, there's more kind of vacation time at Kidney Pond.
Yeah, so we heard from the rangers that there were at least 5 different moose that had been around the lake in the prior week. There was the young yearling cow that we were talking about, a second older female by herself, a bull moose, which I happened to see on the second day, and then a third female, but this one with a calf. So the third female and the calf are the 2 that we did not ever see. So there's always going to be something extra to go back and look for next time, and that will keep me going back. But the second morning, when I spotted a young bull moose, I had spent the time primarily birding and exploring upriver from the lake, knowing that when I came back the way I had to pass through this large, wetland outlet area, kind of a bay. And I knew, because I went out early at sunrise, I knew the chances were better at seeing a moose a little bit later once morning had fully broken. So as I came back upriver and back into the lake, into that cove, that bull moose was just standing there right in the middle of the cove, munching away. And he didn't mind my presence so much, but he was a little annoyed by it. So you could tell that he didn't love that I was there, and I just backed off and tried to get the sun at my back so I could take photos of him as best I could. So he stayed a little bit further away to the far side of the lake and was a bit more cautious, but he waded right into the pond to feed on all those delicious plants, and he didn't seem to mind me floating by too much. And I did get to see him kind of like walking across the cove and eventually climbing his way out onto the shoreline and making his way back into the shade.
That's awesome. So in honor of our amazing experience that we had camping with these incredible animals, I thought we could go over a few fun facts about moose. So I'm going to start.
Okay.
So I thought it was amazing to find out that moose are actually excellent swimmers. I did not know that. Like, they're really good at it. Even calves, their babies can swim. And moose can swim like several miles at a time. And they can dive over 15 feet down to reach aquatic plants.
They're built for the water. This is their thing.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's really, really cool.
Yeah. Moose are the second largest land mammal in North America. Do you know what the first is?
I don't have the slightest idea.
It's a bison.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So moose are the second largest land mammals. They eat up to 50 pounds of plants per day.
Amazing.
And despite their size, they're surprisingly quiet and solitary, especially in the summer, which makes experiences like the ones we had extremely special.
Yeah, and then Dustin mentioned that the female that was hanging around the campground and that we were all seeing every day was a yearling. So yearlings are usually newly independent and exploring their own territory after being pushed out by their moms.
Yeah, the mom might have a new calf coming.
We're not doing that with our teenager. She can stay with me as long as she wants.
Yeah, so moose often will inhabit a territory at a density of about 3 to 5 moose per square mile. And that fits about what we were seeing for these 5 moose.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. And bull moose, like the one I observed from the kayak, they start growing their antlers in spring. And by July, these photos were taken around July 14th. As you can see, they're still in the velvet stage. Velvet is like this blood-rich, furry skin covering on top of their antlers. And it really nourishes the antlers for growth. And they can grow up to 2 to 3 inches per day when they are at their peak growth rate, which is probably what was happening around that time.
Yeah, I still can't believe how lucky we got. I mean, she literally was right outside our porch in the water feeding one morning. It
Well,
was
that
it
was the craziest
amazing.
moment because I saw the bull moose and was excited to come tell you guys about it, and hopefully that we'd all get to see that one later in the day. And as I went up to the cabin, our cabin had like a deck that faced the lake and went all the way from one end of the cabin to the other, straight across the whole backside. And as I was standing at the steps on one end of the deck, telling you about the bull moose, you said to me, "Oh, but what about the young female? Did you see her?" And as I looked up, she was passing behind the cabin and was right
there.
at the other end of
Yeah.
the deck. And I said, "Oh, actually, she's right there."
And I turned and literally didn't even have to look over my shoulder. She was like coming out. It was great. It was great. No, it was amazing. But you know, the first time I ever saw a moose was years ago on a hiking trail in Baxter State Park. And it was our first summer that we were seriously dating, and we had gone on this camping trip together. Remember that?
I do. It was on the Chimney Pond Trail. We did hike into Chimney Pond, but it was too like foggy and the weather forecast didn't support summiting Katahdin that day. So
Yeah.
we ended up going back. And at the time, I had a borrowed old 3.5-inch floppy disk digital camera. It was an old Polaroid, one of the first digital cameras I ever used. I no longer have those photos because they were lost to the ether.
Yeah, but I remember it was a huge bull moose was the first moose I saw, and he was just laying under a tree trying to stay out of the heat of the midday. And yeah, I just absolutely this time especially loved that they were just there in our surroundings at the campground and just sitting on our back porch of our cabin and observing them, and just that being part of my day was like super duper special to me for sure.
Yeah, there was nothing else needed. Just us, the moose, and the call of the loons.